So as many of you would know, I've spent a lot of time doing youth ministry, working with young people, and that extended back to well before I was ordained. I remember working in a youth ministry where we would run weekends, and there was a talk early on in one of the weekends where we'd talk about people's image of God. And this is going to date me a little bit, but the key prop or tool for that talk was an overhead projector. Remember those? And the overhead projector transparency that we used had various pictures of God, and the idea was that the concept was that we could have a distorted picture or image of God in our minds, and perhaps even more deeply in our hearts. And so in each of them, God looked like an old guy with white hair on a big fluffy cloud. And what you would do is you had the transparency and have them covered over, and you'd do the reveal, where you'd reveal each image progressively, right? It was very high-tech stuff. One of the images was of God up in his cloud, and he had those wooden sticks with the strings like a puppeteer. And the idea was it was sort of God as a master of puppets, and the caption was, "Now you've got to follow my plan." God directing us. And so the idea was that could be a part of our image of God, that we might see God as kind of manipulating everything and saying, "You've got to do this, this is how you must act." Another one was of this same kind of image of God, an old guy with a white beard, white hair, but this time with the lightning rod in his hand. And the caption this time was, "This'll show 'em." And so an image of God perhaps who was quick to judge, vindictive even. And I remember a third one where the image of God was of, I've lost my train of thought about what the third one was. I'll come to Santa in a moment. Just give me a second. It was this one. It's the God kind of doing this, and it's like he's weighing out the scales. Have you been naughty or nice, right? So a little bit like Santa, but have you been good or bad, And hopefully the good scale would outweigh the bad scale. And the point of the talk was to say these are all inadequate, distorted images of God, but that we can have them. They can be operative, working in our minds and in our hearts. Well, the image of God that we get from the scriptures today in both the first reading and the gospel is of a God who loves to have a party, a God who hosts a banquet. In the first reading, we're told from the book of the prophet Isaiah that God has a great banquet in store for his people. And that image is picked up by Jesus in the gospel when he tells the parable of the king who throws a banquet for his son for his wedding. The image here is of a God of great generosity, that our God is a generous God. Not a God who is quick to smite us when we do the wrong thing. Not a God who is manipulating things, but a God of great generosity. What does that generosity look like? Well, I think it looks like many, many things. But the greatest act of generosity that God has ever done for the human family was to not spare his son, but to give him over to us, for him to enter into our human condition and to die on the cross for us. The great generosity of God is that he did not spare his own son, but gave him over so that we might be forgiven and that we might share then in the banquet of God, that we might share in the everlasting feast that is the kingdom of heaven. Our God is a generous God in so many ways, but his greatest act of generosity was the gift of his son, Jesus. In the psalm today, the most famous psalm in the Bible, Psalm 23, we say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In other words, he has given me everything I need because he's a good shepherd who looks after me. I shall not want, I shall not be in need. And in Philippians, in the second reading today, in Philippians 4, St Paul says, God will supply our every need according to his riches in the glory of Christ. God will supply our every need. Now that could bring us to an image of God, because some of us might be sitting there thinking, well, I've asked for things from God before and he hasn't supplied them. But as I said, God's not Santa Claus, okay? Or to use a more contemporary kind of image, he's not Oprah Winfrey. You get a car. No, you get a car. Now you get a car, right? That's not the image of God an accurate image of God. To say that God supplies all that we need is to say that he gives us all that's necessary for us to live a life that is full and free and happy. If we believe that, if we believe in a God who is generous, if we believe in a God who says that we shall not really be in want, if we believe in a God who will supply our needs, then I think we too can be generous in response. We can be generous as well. You see, our giving is actually an act of faith. It's about the image of God that we have. If we believe in a God who is generous, then we can be generous in return. And in fact, then, it means that giving is a natural response, a logical response to God's generosity to us, to his goodness to us. In the second reading today, Paul starts off by saying that God will give us everything that we need. He finishes, though, in prayer with a doxology. So the word doxology literally means a word of praise. And so in the most famous doxology we would have in our church is the Glory Be. Glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit. That's a doxology. At the end of the Eucharistic prayer, the priest says, through him, with him and in him. You know the passage. That's a doxology. Well, here in the letter to the Philippians, Paul gives a doxology. After saying everything you need shall be provided, he concludes in prayer. An important conclusion from that we should draw is that our giving is actually a response of prayer too. It's not just about keeping the lights on. You know, when you contribute to the parish, it's not just about keeping the lights on and the fans rotating at different speeds. It's not just about paying the salaries of our lay staff. It's all those things. It's not just about an act of social commitment or responsibility. It's all those things, but it's much more. Our giving to God is actually part of our prayer. It's a response of being a follower of Jesus, of being a disciple. There's another image from our scriptures today that's also relevant. It's that curious bit in the gospel when we're told that after the king has invited everybody, not everybody's come, so he sent people out to invite more people to the party. We're told that there's a man who comes, but he doesn't bother getting changed before he gets to the wedding. So you could imagine if you've been working and all of a sudden you've got this invitation, the expectation of the king was that this guy would have ducked home and put on his Sunday best in order to be presentable and respectable at the wedding. And so the question that poses in the way that Jesus told the parable is this: what's the wedding garment? What are we supposed to wear in order to be welcome at the banquet feast of the king? Now, in the very last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, we're told that the garments that the saints are wearing is the garments, they're white, and they're of their righteous deeds. In other words, of their deeds of virtue, the good things that they have done. Now, I want to be really clear about this. God's salvation of us is his free gift to us. There is nothing you can do to earn the salvation of God. There's nothing you can do that makes yourself right before God. That is Jesus' free gift to you. He dies out of love for you so that you might be brought into relationship with God. As I said before, it's his greatest gift to us. But if we've accepted that salvation, in the image of the parable, if we've accepted that invitation, there is a lifestyle, a way of living that follows from that. That is a way of living that expresses what is true and good and beautiful. And part of that will be about how we live in our generosity towards others. So part of wearing the right garment at the wedding is about how we would be generous as God is generous. And that's perhaps the most important point for today, that when we're generous, we actually share in the generosity of God. I want you to think for a moment. The reason why you're here at church today, the reason why you come to Mass, is because faith was passed on to you by others. Most likely it was your parents, but I know for many others here today, it was a mentor or somebody you met, even here in this parish. It might have been a teacher. Jesus is the only Saviour of the world, but through God's purpose and plan, he draws others in to help in that work of salvation, to bring us to faith. Well, in a similar way, when we're generous, when we give freely of ourselves, we're sharing in the generosity of God. You get to partner with God, as it were, in being generous to others. You become an instrument of his blessing to others. Now, we can be generous in all sorts of ways. We can be generous in all manner of ways. But the true measure of what's really important to us and where our generosity becomes real and concrete is what we spend our time doing and where we spend our money. They're the two signs of what really matters to us, what's really important to us, and they're also the two most significant expressions of our generosity. So over the next couple of weeks, I'd really ask you to just discern, to really take to prayer, how is it that God's inviting you to be generous? How is he inviting you to share in being generous, in his very generosity with others?